Hello and welcome back for more barely planned and poorly thought through WeakAuras tutorial stuff. We've done a bunch of pretty high level custom TSU making, so I thought maybe we'll take it back a little bit more basic and look through some of the stuff that you can do with conditions in WeakAuras. So we'll just make a basic icon today instead of anything too crazy, and then see how much information we can actually put into that icon from various different sources. I'm on the hunter because we've got an ability here that has charges, and we'll use that to show some different stuff. So we'll make basically a simple Cooldown Aura for Mongoose Bite. Probably worth saying I used the spell ID here instead of the name. This means that if you share the WeakAura that you make on Wago or anything else, then it won't matter if someone else is using a different client language. It won't be checking for the string Mongoose Bite, but it'll be checking for the spell ID, which will work on all clients. So we've got an icon, cooldown progress spell. We've given it the spell that we want it to use. We want it to show always, not just on cooldown. So once it's not on cooldown, it won't hide; it'll stay there. And we want it to show that cooldown. Automatic icon's good. We'll have it show the stacks and the progress. Let's have it show the global as well. So we've got an icon, shows the global swirling around, shows the number of stacks, there's 3 there. If we use one, it goes on cooldown. So what can we do with it? Let's first of all start by having it show range. So we've got a target here. We can see the actual button on the bar is red until you get in range, and then it lights up. Well, we can do that in WeakAuras. What we'll do is we'll add another trigger. Status range check. We're comparing between us and the target, and Mongoose Bite is a 5-yard range, so less than or equal to 5. Now we've made another trigger. At the minute, we've got all triggers required for this WeakAura to show. So right now it's completely untriggered, the whole thing, and only shows at all if we get in range. That might be something that you want. But in this case, we just want to change the display when we're in range. We don't want it to hide completely. So instead of all triggers, we could change to any, which would work for the purposes of this, because trigger 1 is always going to be true. But just as a demonstration, I suppose, we can use the custom function and decide exactly which triggers we want to be included in the overall activation. So we'll make a function in the activation, custom activation. WeakAuras will send in a table that's got all the triggers in it. I usually call it T, but just to be a bit more descriptive, we'll call it triggers. And so that's a table that's it's an array, and it contains a true or false for each of the triggers that we're using. Now we just want it to compare the state of the current trigger 1, so we can just return triggers 1. And so each time a trigger changes its state from true to false, this little functional fire, it'll compare what it needs to, which is only the state of trigger 1, and so should just always return true no matter what. So now we want it to actually do something with trigger 2. We've made it so that it's ignored for pretty much everything else, but we've got this trigger 2 that is triggering and untriggering when we get closer or further away. So let's add a condition for it. If trigger 2 is active, then we'll change the colour to red. Well, that did work. What's going on? Actually, we want it to be when it's inactive anyway. Oh, I'll tell you what's happening actually. It's probably that it's a very red icon. But we want it to be when it's inactive. Let's make it darker. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, there we go. It's a bit more visible. Although it's not changing when we get close. So it's something wrong with the trigger. Let's have a look. Can't see what would be doing that. I've not actually messed about with this range trigger very much. Let's see if using that changes it. No. Okay, I really am that stupid. I didn't have a target. So there we go. Working kind of as intended. Let's just have another look. So as we get too far to use the ability, you can see it happens at the same time as the icon changes. It goes darker red, so we can see that it's unusable. Another common thing to add would be a glow. I guess we want to glow on max charges on an ability like this. You might want to do something like glowing on max resources if it was an ability that used mana or something, or maybe when it's about to run out, if you've got a duration that's about to run out and you want to remind yourself to reuse it. So if we're doing it on having max charges, so we want to get them used, we could add another trigger for that, but actually that information is already in our trigger 1, so we can add another condition. Trigger 1 stacks equals 3, then glow and ticket. On LVUI it's actually difficult to see this checkbox, but make sure that you do use it. So there we are, we're glowing. If we use one, the glow stops. And when that stack comes back, it should start glowing again. Now say we wanted it to glow on 3 stacks, but not when we're out of range. So currently, we close WeakAuras, it's glowing and we're out of range right now. We get in range, it's still glowing, and in range. We like the glow when it's on full, but we don't want it bothering us all the whole time when we've not got a target or if we're out of range. What we can do is conditions take effect in order, in their own order. So if you had condition 2 override condition 1, then the only output you'd see would be the last one that was set. And so what we can do here, because we're already checking for this range in condition 1, we can actually move that down below. So the first one is now glow, and in this condition where we're checking for being out of range, we can add another property to unset that glow. So we're leaving it unticked. So if we're at 3 stacks now, it will try to glow, and then the next condition will undo that and tell it not to. So hopefully as we get closer now, it should start glowing and light up. But also if we use a stack, it stops glowing. It's a really useful concept to know about conditions going in order like that and overriding each other. You can basically use that to create and or states. So if you need multiple triggers, you can have it, you know, one thing set if it's true and another thing unset if that's false, and that effectively is an and requirement. So now if we go on cooldown, got this thing sweeping around, but it's still actually usable because we've got 2 stacks left, and it would be nice to not have the icon go quite so dark while it's still actually a usable ability. So what we can do is actually affect the sweep that's going around, the cooldown sweep. So we'll add a condition for if the stacks is greater than 0, so basically while it's still usable in any way, then we'll use a little bit of custom code here. So that cooldown sweep is in the Aura env region, and it's called cooldown, and it's actually a Blizzard widget that's being used, and that has a whole load of methods on it that we can use. And we're going to use set draw edge, set it to true. WeakAuras turns that off by default because it is fairly ugly, to be honest, and doesn't fit with the overall aesthetic. But we're going to use that now, and we'll also set the actual colour of the swipe, which at the minute is that kind of half opacity black. Set swipe colour, and we'll set it to 0 opacity. Now, custom code that you run in conditions runs basically just once as the condition is passed. So unlike something like this, like stacks, which will set the glow on equaling 3 and unset it on not equaling 3, this will only run this piece of code as the stacks becomes greater than 0. So we'll need to also undo that, like it won't undo itself. So we need to add another condition. Stacks equals 0. So when it equals 0, we want to go back to this kind of a default look. So we'll run custom code, copy this over, set that to false, and this is about 0.8 opacity, can't remember exactly. So now what we want to see is if we go on cooldown but we've still got a usable ability, we'll have a little glowing edge sweeping around, but we won't have the full darkening going on with this the cooldown. So there we go, we've got this kind of glowing sweep going around here. And if I go down to 0 stacks, see, we lose that glowing edge, but we get the full cooldown. Now if this weren't quite visible enough, this little glowy edge, you could increase the opacity but still make it different to earlier. Let's give that a go as well. So instead of going all the way to 0, oh, this is the alpha channel, so it's RGB alpha on these values. So we could change it down to say 0.2, just something quite low. Let's try that, see how it looks. Well, that's there, but it is very subtle, so you probably want it slightly higher than that. Why not? Let's see. There you go. That's probably a decent balance. So it's still clearly a usable spell. It's kind of lit up and clearly becomes unusable at that point. Tell you what, I think just for the stream I'll make this a bigger icon so we can see it a bit easier. And we'll make the text a bit bigger too. And actually worth noting, oh no, it's changed. So sometimes if you change the size of a font, it goes to dots like that. That's just because it can't fit the content in the size of the frame that's there. If it ever does that and doesn't fix itself, then just reload your UI. It should reload those elements. So the next thing that's bothering me is that this progress goes around. So we like the global showing. When we use a global, this going around is okay, we like that. But this countdown for the global is just annoying. We don't need text for that. But we can code around that. So here, instead of just %p to show the current progress, we'll use a custom text to %c, which has opened up this custom function box. And custom text receives a bunch of args from WeakAuras, kind of current information. We've got this listed in the WeakAuras Discord in the resources channel. So if I copy that straight out of there, this is what we've got. And so this kind of current information on the icon is being sent into this function all the time. And what we're interested in is we want to differentiate the global going around from the actual cooldown. And now we know that the cooldown of mongoose bite is 11.3, significantly more than the duration of a global. So we can actually keep this pretty simple by just checking if that duration is a small number, like a smaller number than mongoose bite will ever be. Say 2, globals, what, 1.5, whatever. If it's greater than 2, then we can return progress. So hopefully now we close that and use a global. We've got the sweep going around, but we're not seeing numbers for that. But hopefully if we go and use a stack and show the actual cooldown, we've got a countdown going. Something else we might want to do. Oh, in fact, so earlier on when I hadn't noticed that I didn't have a target for the range check, I could have saved myself some bother by actually having the icon know that, you know, see that I don't have a valid target and change accordingly. So let's add another trigger, and this one will be status unit characteristics of the target, and I want to check that it's attackable. So make sure that we have a valid target for this ability. And this will also check if we have a target at all. So it'll return false if we don't have a target, it'll return false if we have a target that's friendly. And so now we can use this in another condition. Add condition if trigger 3 is active. Oh, that's actually pretty useful to know. It's got all this, all the information in your unit characteristics you can actually use as separate conditions. But we've already checked attackable, so we can just check if trigger 3 is active. True. Then let's desaturate, and again tick box, make sure that you can see that on ELV if you use it. So hopefully now, without a target, we're desaturating, but it's difficult to tell with the colour that we're using. So maybe we can swap these around. Instead of having this change colour when we're out of range, let's have this desaturate instead. Desaturate tick. And this one will have it change colour. See how that looks. So we've not got a valid target and we're desaturated. We have a valid target and we're red because we're out of range. Really difficult to see red on red. Trouble is that these colours are filters, so if you've got a red icon and you change it to green, it'll filter out anything but the green colours. So now we'll probably see it go just very dark indeed. That's not so bad. Although not going away when we get close. Okay, let's find out why. Now we want to check if it's false, of course. So range check passes, and if we don't have a valid target, then it changes colour. So hopefully that will also keep this colour if we target a friendly. Yeah, because it's not attackable. Let's face it, green's just confusing for something you're not supposed to do. Change it back to red. So, is there any more information we can throw into this thing? Maybe. One of the things that gets requested quite a lot is being able to use animations in conditions. So you don't just want to change the colour, you want to have it, you know, bounce or something. That can't currently be done, but we can do something along those lines. So say we don't just want it to glow on full stacks, but we also want it to animate and do a little bounce. And we've already got a condition for it, and we can't set the animation directly, but we can come over here, use a custom slide animation. Now, if we're going to be using a custom function, but we can get WeakAuras to put in the maths required for these different types of animation for us, and then we can just add the little bit of code we need to decide whether or not that should take effect. So if we want a bounce animation, we choose bounce and then choose custom function, and WeakAuras puts all this information in for us, which is very handy because this stuff is just maths, but it's kind of a pain to have to write yourself or look up yourself to find out how to do it. And so we want this code here to only run if the condition is true, and anytime that it's not true, then we want it to just be stationary. And again, in resources on the WeakAuras Discord, we've got a little snippet here. So local C for conditions equals this, and again, this similar to what was being sent into the trigger activation function that we did right at the start. This is a table that's got true or false for each condition that we've made. So we can go back to conditions. Condition 1 is our glow for full stacks. So we can do if C1, then maybe worth saying for Lua, we don't need to check if C1 equals true. Like that would be the kind of verbose way of doing it. After an if, the next bit basically will be reduced down to a true or false at the end of it all. So if you did, you know, if 1 is greater than 0, then that'll reduce down to true. And we can kind of bypass all of that actual check by just inserting the value. This is true. So if condition 1 is true, then do all this stuff. And if not, then we just want to return base values, which are being sent into the function on start x and start y. Those are just the base values. So we return those instead. So now close WeakAuras. It's bouncing because it's at full stacks. Hopefully if we go and use one, it becomes stationary. And then as it hits 3 again, it starts bouncing. So that's how you can kind of use conditions in animations. Now this is actually, all that's doing is checking the state of condition 1, and condition 1 is just checking the state of stacks. So you don't really need to make a condition and use it. You could just check if aura env state stacks, is greater than or equal to 3. That's basically doing the same thing. But we've got a condition already, and it's useful to be able to do that sometimes. Maybe you want some different things to happen on different conditions. So this icon's getting pretty crazy at this point, but actually, before we get onto that, let's also do a text color change. Throw in yet another condition. For trigger 1, remaining duration less than 2, and have the text color, this is text 1 for stacks, text 2 for progress. I'll have that go red. There you go, so it goes red when it gets to low. Do you know though, this bouncing icon is pretty annoying. Maybe we like the animation, but we don't want the whole icon bouncing. We just want this text to bounce. I only just thought of this, so I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it, but let's find out. So this little bit of code is giving us a distance, a bounce distance. We can probably use that and apply it to, instead of outputting startText, we can just change the offset on the text itself. So that text will be in Aura env region text, I think. So I think that one's called stacks and the other one is text 2. So we're basically here talking about re-anchoring constantly. So we'll have to clear the points that are currently set. And then re-anchor. So we'll have bottom right anchored to the region, bottom right, and then we'll put in these offsets as the X and Y for that. I'm not at all sure this will work. Let's find out. If we close that, there we go. So we are bouncing. And if we use a stack, it should stop bouncing. That's kind of nice, actually. So with a normal animation, when the animation stops running, it returns back to the base position no matter where it is. So say it's been at the high point of its bounce, and then the animation stops, it'll snap back to being at the bottom. Because we're just setting an offset, the moment we stop setting that, it freezes where it is. It's actually kind of cute. Although actually, I guess when it starts again, it's going to snap to a new position. I think we probably just got away with that rather than it not snapping. I think it just looked okay. But that's okay, I like that. The only thing is, it's kind of wedged right in the corner now, because we've got no offset when it's not bouncing. So we kind of need a start value for that, which was being done by start X and start Y on the main animation, but now we're editing it. So we want it to be in a little bit from the left as it's starting X. So let's say -3 for that, and up a little bit from the bottom, so 3 for that. See how that looks. Just make it a bigger change so we can see it more clearly. Yeah, there we go, that's better. So for a big icon you need quite big values for that. Okay, so now something that I do quite a lot, which is really kind of pimping your WeakAuras with extra stuff that it doesn't really have. So you can add, we could add a texture. We could add a circle texture to the top corner to show when something happens, or whatever. I'm thinking maybe instead of the glow, we add a model animation. And I looked up this kind of fiery thing earlier. Maybe we can have the icon go on fire instead of just glowing. This was my thought. Poorly planned as it was. So let's look into how to do that. Basically we want to create a new frame and add it to the icon. So the init code will run once when the aura first loads. But if we're creating frames, we don't want it to, say we open WeakAuras, change something, close it again. The init runs again. We don't want it making another frame each time we do that. We could be editing things quite a lot, so that would end up getting to be a lot of frames. So we check for the existence of a thing first, and then if it doesn't exist yet, then we create it. So if we're making something called flame, that we're going to add to the region, then if not or flame, so if it doesn't exist, then we will create it. Flame equals create frame, and we'll use a player model type of frame parented to the region. And then we'll actually stick it in the region table. So we've not given it a global name, so it won't be messing up the global table, but we can put it into the region so that we'll keep track of it. So we've created a model, but it's completely blank. There's nothing in it at the minute. So we're going to be setting a few things on this frame that we've made. So I'll just put a few of those in. First thing is set model. We can grab the model path from here. Note that I'm using these double square brackets. Is kind of another way, instead of quotes or apostrophes, for showing that you're talking about a string. The good thing about these double things is that things like slashes inside won't actually escape like they normally would. If you have a slash inside quotes, that'll try and escape the next thing. And so if you were using quotes, you'd have to double up all these slashes so they don't get escaped. I've just got in the habit of using these double square brackets for strings mostly, and then you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just copy paste with single slashes and stuff. Keep model on hide is something that I've always done with these models. I think WoW is quite aggressive at getting rid of stuff that it's not being used anymore, so if you hid this model, then I think WoW would try and collect it up as garbage if you don't have this set to true. Might be wrong though, I've not really experimented enough to be sure. We want this thing to be behind the icon, so we'll set its strata to be behind. We want this flame to be behind the icon and kind of flaming up around it, so we'll set the point to the bottom of the region. And shouldn't really be necessary, but we'll clear points before that just in case. And then we'll set the size. We want it to be bigger than the region itself, so that it's flaming up around it. Set size is the width and then the height. Now, if we look at this, it's pretty small in the box. We could start messing with camera options to zoom it in and stuff, so it fills more of the frame that we've created. But actually, I'm going to kind of cheat and just make it pretty big. So we'll take the width of the icon and just multiply it by a lot. That might be too much. And same with the height. Don't need it so high. And we'll show it. So now hopefully when I... Okay, well there it is straight away. It's already been created. So it's not subtle. That's quite epic, I suppose. So currently it's showing all the time. It's also a little bit high. Let's lower it down a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, so it surrounds the icon a bit more than that. So yeah, it shows all the time. At the minute, no matter what we're doing, it's just going to be flaming away there. Let's make it actually replace the glow that we're using. Oh well, we'll do it with the glow. So at the same time as reaching 3 stacks and glowing, we'll also add the property for run custom code, and Aura Env region flame is our flame. Show. Have we got a condition for less than 3? Nope. So we'll add another condition. Trigger 1 stacks. Anything less than 3 will run custom code. Copy this. And set it to hide instead. And when we created it, we'll set this to hide here so that it doesn't start flashing away before we've even needed it. So now it should have that flame effect going at 3 stacks and then go away when we get less than 3. There we go. I have made the ugliest icon in the world. But hopefully this gives you an idea of some of the possibilities that you can do with WeakAuras by going crazy with conditions and adding huge ugly flames to things. So this is a bit of a simpler and shorter tutorial thing. Hope it was useful. As ever, come and find me in the WeakAuras Discord or comment on my chat if you want to see anything specific in future. Thanks for watching.